And the challenge is, well, are they really doing a good job in supplying it? Some people say yes, some people say no, some people say they could be doing more, some people say we're not getting enough money for, or enough service for what we give them in money. And as soon as it's not your jurisdiction and you're dealing with buying services from other jurisdictions, you have all of these different issues just springing up all over the place.
So it dilutes your voice.
Absolutely.
The bigger something gets, the smaller the individual control. So the localism is, you're a localism guy. I am as well. I feel like the closer you can have, the more power that people can have individually, usually you're on the right track, even though there's the overhead that goes with that.
Yes,
that's the price you pay for representation.
Yes, absolutely. But ask yourself this question. If you've ever asked a bureaucrat, so who do I talk to about this project? Ask yourself about the light rail. Who's responsible for light rail? As an easy topic to talk about. Everybody's going to say, oh, well, he's in charge of that. And then you go over there and say, oh, no, we don't make the decision. He makes the decision. You'll get the runaround all day long about who has the actual decision-making power. We had a citizen come to us the other day asking us to tell him who was in charge of this issue. And he says, can't we get everybody in the same room at the same time so we can figure out and tell them why this is a good idea or why it's not a good idea? And the reality is, these bureaucrats love being able to spread power around so that they can always say, oh, well, you need to talk to them over there. They're not responsible, and yet the project keeps moving forward with their input. It's a sad aspect of how government works. And so, yes, I prefer control to be local, but as you say, there is a premium for that. And people have to be willing to support their own city with the cost of running a city.
Sure. I've seen not only that passing the buck occur with bureaucrats, I've seen it with representatives. Our Vancouver mayor is famous for that, passing the buck. So it's not up to me. But in reality, I would think that those that are in charge are responsible at the state level and the federal level would look to local representatives to faithfully represent the constituents. Does it make sense?
Oh, certainly. We certainly hope we can fulfill that, yes. Yeah. Well, also, the city officials always lobby the state. I think that's something that most citizens may not be aware of, but there will always be some representatives from the administration or from the city council that go to the state capital and to ask the representatives on different boards that have to deal with our issues, or our own specific representatives in the 18th, to ask them, hey, could you pass this bill, or could you make sure that our funding project is secure for, Highway 14 or whatever. We do lobby the state legislature on behalf of the citizens.
So there's a staff member, an employee of the city that is a paid lobbyist for the state?
No, not a paid lobbyist, but we go up as representatives of the city.
Okay, so the council members themselves go up and at the state.
Sometimes it's council members. Most often it's the mayor and city administrator.
Okay, so there's not a paid lobbyist?
No. Some
cities do have paid lobbyists.
We're not that big.
Glad to hear it, because we have representatives. How much do you as a city, or you as a representative of the city, interact with the county? We have county commissioners.
It's not very often that I hear of much interaction between the city and the county. We definitely have partnerships with the county, whether it's for recycling or whether it's for other issues. But it's not too often that we have direct interaction between the the county commissioners and the city council.
So normally there's not things that impact the county policies normally don't impact the city very much.
Well, most of the time the way that works is a interlocal agreement will come to the city, and you'll see the signatures of all the other cities and jurisdictions that have signed on to this, and they say, here. And if you have any objections, then it would have to be approved as a special waiver, or all the other cities and jurisdictions would have to say, oh, okay, we're okay with that change as well. And that as well, most of these interlocal agreements are a great idea. Recycling services, it's reciprocal equipment use, like during or for paving equipment. If this city has a piece of paving equipment that we don't have, we can borrow it at a certain rate and so on and so forth. Those are really good agreements. But when it comes to the decision making on that agreement, it's such a large thing that the assumption is you can't change it. So that does diminish on some level your sovereignty of your city.
So you call them interlocal agreements.
Mm-hmm.
Are they normally sponsored by or started out by the county?
Several of them are, yes. They can also be just between two cities as well, or just between a few jurisdictions. Yeah, the interlocal agreement just means you have different local bodies of government that have this agreement, where it's usually a reciprocal agreement.
So that sounds like that may be kind of a hybrid or a step in the right direction of sharing resources
Right.
to minimize the overhead and still have the local representation.
Right, exactly. And that's a good thing, and where we have those agreements, sometimes it works out incredibly to our benefit. Most of the time, the reason why we have to have those are because of state mandates. Well, state mandates, you have to do this. Well, okay, how do we do that? We don't have the resources, but the county does, or the city of Vancouver does, and so let's have an interlocal agreement with them to be able to contract out. Yeah, there's always one other jurisdiction which is telling us we have to do something like this.
Mm-hmm. For jobs in Washougal,
Mm-hmm.
do many people drive west? Do many people cross the 205? Or many people just work there in Washougal? What's the distribution?
It's actually most of our citizens do work elsewhere other than in Washougal. And some people refer to that as a bedroom community, where we don't have the industry in our own city to support our own citizens. That's an interesting topic of discussion, because as a city official, it would be nice to have your city be able to support itself with jobs locally. We are always interested in having our citizens be able to, or have the industry right there for having jobs right in the city. However, most of our citizens do work elsewhere if they're part of the workforce. And so as a result, many of our citizens, once again, are going to be going over the I-5 bridge, and they're going to be impacted by any changes to the I-5 bridge or the 205 bridge. There are many that do work across the river. It would be nice to be able to say, well, as a city council, we're going to create jobs and make jobs happen here. But I'm reminded that government at any level cannot tell people where they must do something without taking liberty away. That's how it works. So even though I would love to have those jobs here, I think the best thing we can do as a city to encourage that is to reduce the regulations, to keep our taxes low or lower the taxes, which is a discussion we'll be having here in the near future, because we have over 8% tax in Washougal. It would be nice to get that lower. And yet, these are complex things. Even if you lower the interest or the percentage of tax for sales tax, and you lowered the regulation barrier, there's no guarantee that businesses would come. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. Businesses will do whatever they need to in their own best interest. And as a government, our job is simply just to protect life, liberty, and property. And it's so tempting to want to do more, but that's our job.
It's good that you know that role. And many people, it seems they want to do so much more. It's under the name of compassion or caring for others, but it's other people's money. You can do compassionate things with your own money, but it's no longer compassion if it's somebody else's money.
The challenge is that if you're not going to use the power of government to do something that you know is right, such as helping a human, if you don't use the power of government, it's easy to say that it's easy for people to accuse you of not wanting to help that person. But as you say, you can do it with your own money, and I encourage that. I certainly think that we do need to help the poor. We need to help the people who have difficulty helping themselves. That as a society is our job, it's our purpose. But we should do that as individuals and through our churches and community or our organizations. Government should be protecting life, liberty, and property.
Good role. When it comes to growth versus sprawl, some people will look at growth and say, oh, that's bad. I'm going to call it sprawl. That's a bad name because it just consumes the earth. And other people will say, well, growth. Growth is good because it brings jobs, it brings economy, and it's a healthy thing. Where are you on that?
Well, I think whenever you start labeling something, I think you hit the nail on the head. You can make it sound bad or you can make it sound good depending on which label you apply to it. Part of the challenge we have in Washington State is the Growth Management Act. The Growth Management Act, or GMA, dictates what cities and jurisdictions must do in order to contain growth or to allow growth. And so every city has to have its master plan under the GMA. We do as well, and our master plan says this is where our urban growth boundary will be. In fact, we have part of our urban growth boundary out of our city, recognizing that very likely this will be part of the city at some point. So yeah, you can build there with the expectation of being in the city at some point, but you're not there yet, that type of thing. But here's an interesting question that I heard once. If you had the choice, if money were truly no object, where would the average person want to live? And what type of house would they want to live in? Many, many, many people, if not most people, would say, I would want a large house way outside of town where I could hear the birds chirping, have lots of trees around me, lots of fresh air. If that's what they want, then think about if they have just a little bit of free money and they have a little bit of choice about where they'd want to live. They're going to replicate that on some level, and that's where so-called sprawl comes from, is that you get on the outskirts of the city and you have some of those birds chirping and trees and this nice natural setting with more elbow room from between you and your neighbors. I think that is one of the major drivers for why cities expand the way they do. It's just individual choice.
So the GMA, did that establish the requirement that every city have a urban growth boundary?
I believe so, yes.
When did that happen?
Not too long ago, and it can be undone if the politicians had the desire to do so. The problem is, politically speaking, I don't think it'll ever be repealed. Even though it has many problems and has caused many problems in many jurisdictions, I don't think it'll ever be repealed, because if you're a politician trying to repeal the Growth Management Act, the political opponents could very easily claim that you don't want to have smart growth, you don't want to determine what's the best way, and obviously these are good policies and so on and so forth. Some of the aspects of the GMA already existed before it was voted into law, such as zoning. Cities have always had the legitimate right to zone, at least in my lifetime, they've always had the legitimate right to say, we will allow heavy industry here, housing here, commercial over here, highway commercial over there. And it's legitimate for a city to say, we value the fact that we can have a residential neighborhood without a factory in the middle of it. And so we're going to have the houses here and the factories over here. And on some level, the GMA was attempting to have a one-size-fits-all approach to that for all cities throughout the state.
If you want to move the urban growth boundary, is that quite a process? Is it difficult, or is it something that is flexible that you can adjust it as necessary?
I wasn't actually on the council when we changed, or when we reviewed our GMA requirements and reports. So I haven't been through that process yet. So when it comes up for renewal, or should I say when we have to update our master plan, we'll be part of that process. From my understanding, I know a little bit about that process of what it takes to update the master plan, so I won't speculate about the rest of the process. But as with any bureaucracy, when the rules are set before you from a higher jurisdiction, you don't really have much of an option but to follow what those rules say.
Mm-hmm. I expect that you have a choice of either going up or out when it comes to the definitions, and that has to do with who's in charge, who defines what is growth.
Right. Also, Washougal has two natural boundaries. We have the river to our south, and we also have the scenic area to our east. So we can't sprawl that direction or that direction. We can only move, and also we have Camas to our west. So there's only one direction the city could grow if we were going to have much more land join the city. And there are many challenges to adding more and more land to the city as we continue to go north. It's very hilly up that direction, and you have to ask the question, how many miles of sewer pipe and water pipe are we going to install out there to support the additions to the city? If you don't have, and part of that balance is, if you don't have the industrial base and the tax base to support services such as water and fire services to that additional boundary layer, can you support a larger city? So right now, it seems like we're sort of staying the same size for right now. But that doesn't mean people can't build a house out there, they just won't be inside the city.